of whoever, came up with it to begin with, because it does make it's tricky. It's like, well, wait, how do I do that?
It, just because you
But
put trans in front of everything doesn't mean that it's
yeah,
part of my argument or my life.
one I
Like
would say
that's
to
one
the
part I would say.
yeah, I would say to the leftists, like, when you ask them that question, they need to consider the repercussions of allowing it. We've got, black and their protected class. What happens to um, that status once this starts to seep in?
With
Like, there's a ton of questions, like repercussion questions.
what the argument
Uh,
is that race isn't real, but we have to define race or understand race because
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of history of racism
Yep.
and bigotry towards specific races. So that's the only reason why we have to acknowledge it. When you're
but
talking about someone like identifying with a different melanin, it's different than saying like someone identifies or wants the same things that the default for normal female wants,
Yeah,
or vice
because
versa.
questions would come up such as like, okay, well, this person,
We're operating in the spectrum of the same
yeah,
shit that's available.
yeah, but like,
When we talk about race, though, it's different. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
like that, you're good. Like with race, so like, say somebody identifies as black, well, then someone might ask, well, you know, do they are they protected now? Are they, because obviously the historical context, like, okay, like, are their ancestors, were they slaves? Like, and like all of these things, and it's like, well, I don't know. Like, obviously, for the
um,
I,
for
I
the
think I
latter,
think
the
the
answer is
utility
no.
of
But
like being called black, like or earning the ability to being black, doesn't really offer you a lot of good things anyway. Like
you can
well,
talk
it isn't like
anti-federalist.
couldn't
sorry.
that the argument that you'll get from a lot of like conservatives who are arguing against transgenderism, they'll bring up like
Uh-huh.
domestic violence shelters or prisons or all these institutions we have to protect biological women in the same vein with
Uh-huh.
gender. So I feel
Yeah.
like that I
Yeah.
don't know how to substantiate the difference necessarily.
Yeah.
so
But do you understand that anyone could put trans in front of everything, like trans humanism, trans this, and like I don't have to argue that point. It's just
What's
being
a
trans in general. Yeah.
I mean, to
what's
some
a
extent, I think you kind of. I mean, to some extent, everything is socially constructed at some point. Like we're
Yeah, but one
developing
of
it
them
all
is
through
human.
language. Right.
Yeah, but one of them is human. When it comes to the transhumanism argument, unless you're okay with equating both transracialism and that together
Yeah, let's not go
for the
there.
same
so
argument.
so yeah, if I could jump in because I've
Get in there.
argued this plenty of times. So the distinction is actually rather simple. Um, there's kind of two different questions that we can ask ourselves for what like it means for someone to be transgender. There's one answer that is the more like up and coming biological neurological route that talks about like a brain sex having a disconnect with like certain genitalia.
Uh-huh.
And very obviously nothing about that has a one-to-one translation over to race.
Yep.
Or if it does, then it's just a question of like melanin, and it's very obvious that somebody can't really make that kind of transition.
That's true. Yeah.
In the end, like
Then,
race is just a social construct at this point.
But then if we
well,
get to the point
Keep
yes,
where we
going,
yes,
can,
dude.
yes, and no.
if we start being
So
able to give someone like a brain MRI and say, oh, your brain has characteristics that are stereotypically more female,
Black.
then well, no, but female. Then if someone's brain doesn't have those characteristics in an MRI, is their gender identity not valid? If that's the
no, so that's why and you're making the right point about an identity. So the second point to note about someone who's transgender is they also are often having an identification with a certain category, the category of like being a woman, or being a man, or being something different.
Yeah.
But at the core of what this category is, it's an identification category. It's these
True.
sets of bodies are women, these sets of bodies are men, and these people have decided to identify themselves as such. So if you're talking about someone who's transitioning to a different gender, it's just a question of identification with an identity. The disanalogy to race is that race is not just a question of identification of something. Race
Yeah.
is, while also socially constructed, has a specific material origin to its history.
Yep.
So race was created not out of an identification of certain characteristics, but rather race was created out of a material disconnect between certain people. So when you talk about, if you want to talk about, if someone wants to claim that they're transitioning to a different race, it's that act is to deny the material history of what it means to be a certain race. So
Right.
you can't transition in the same kind of
Wait,
ways you can to a gender.
can't you do the same thing
With
when you
reproductive,
transition to a woman? Like, would you now become under that protected class, right? Like,
Well, what Duke's saying is that you can transition to another race, but even though you're doing that, you can't therefore inherit, for example, your ancestors being slaves and all of the historical kind of baggage that would come along with it.
so
You know,
right. But when you transition to becoming a woman, you don't automatically inherit all the struggles women have gone through in history,
Right.
right?
But
Nope.
the
No.
distinction, and that's the point, that being a woman has nothing to do with like, or what it is to be a woman does not mean to be someone who has gone through some of the struggles that a woman has gone through. Because
sure.
that's not what the
That would be
I'm
social.
trying very hard to avoid fancy flossy words. That's
Yes,
not.
please. I
Yeah,
don't know any of them.
yeah.
but
That's not what it means to be a woman. In other
well,
words.
so as far as I might be totally off base here, my understanding, because like the Latin prefix, we add womb to human.
Okay.
It was relative to
No,
humans with wombs and
that's not
humans
true.
without.
No.
That's not
That's
You
a
know
true.
what
myth.
they used to call a bundle of sticks before? You know, like
Woman, woman does
Yeah.
not
words
mean
changed.
woman, man. It's like a myth.
Like we can say
Okay.
like a bundle of sticks meant this in the 1500s, but what does that mean to me now?
Right. So that's my argument. My understanding is that linguistically, historically, the word had an absolute biological meaning, and the ask is that we use these words differently to make
I
room
think by
for.
putting a trans in front of everything is kind of effective because it identifies me in a way that allows me to
Yep.
shortcut a lot of things, right?
Can
So
you,
by
I
identifying
agree.
as a trans woman, if I identified as a male, like I am false advertising to a lot of people.
If you
Right, but
identify as a.
that's the big push, right? Like you don't want to have to say you're trans woman. Isn't that what people
That's
are
a
pushing for? You don't want to have to say
that's
you're a
a
trans man or trans woman. You want to be able to just say I'm a woman.
well, I think like we're like at a weird standstill when it comes to that, right? Because we can't create our own pronouns because
You
that gets
can't
mocked.
create
Yeah.
your own pronouns. Wait, what do you
No,
mean?
like
Like she,
as
her?
another definition. So like just call me you a fucking unicorn. I don't care. But at the end of it, like, do you respect me or do you give me like the basic human rights? Like I
Well,
don't care about like the name. But when it
yeah,
comes to like some people that want to go like trans women or women, like that doesn't seem like that big of a jump when it comes
I'm,
to like identifying as that shit.
and I wasn't arguing
I
against that. I was saying
Oh
if we
no,
agree as a
I have problems with
society
it, but
to
yeah, I'm just
use
asking
the.
questions. I'm not against it or anything.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
you'll never rile me up. Trust me, I swear to God. Cool.
Okay,
Everything's cool.
I was
I
just
do
saying
not
like.
hate anyone on this fucking channel, even though they've like shit talked me and everything. I'm
What's
cool.
up, Federalist?
yeah,
Oh,
can you? Yeah, Federalist. What are you saying?
I was just gonna say, like, I think it's fair as a society to agree, like, hey, we're gonna use the words woman and man to express how people identify in society, and but then it seems like the same argument could be used for race very easily. Like, I don't know how to stop the loop when you're getting in arguments about transracialism.
I
well,
just think
Haven't
there's a
I
lot
found.
more
thought
nuance in between that.
I
But
thought I gave you an argument. Was there something you didn't agree with or didn't understand?
Yeah. So could you repeat your argument?
summarize.
So the super short version of it is to be a woman. The category of woman has always already been a question of identity and identification. Expressing yourself in a certain way that is that resembles what we think womanness looks like, so to speak. The question of somebody being like black or white, these sorts of races were in fact indeed socially constructed, but the way in which they were socially constructed has a specific material history to them. So for someone to transition is to suggest that they can do just sort of a switch in identification, but not have to do anything else that comes along with what it actually means to be black or white.
What if it's someone that grew up in like a predominantly black neighborhood, but they themselves are white? And then would they now be able to say like the N word, for example?
But you
Yeah.
understand that experience would still be different, right?
Yeah, I understand, but if they're a white person who grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, their experience is different because they're now a white person in what a system that oppresses black people, not white people, I guess.
I get,
Yeah,
So
but
so they
like,
would be oppressed in the
But
same way.
this is
like,
but
why
let's just say, for the sake of argument, that doesn't really matter because you could say the same thing against trans women, right? So we kind of have to cross that off.
well, and also
I'm
um,
like
not
we
sure
used
what
to
get the leak in there,
identify
but
white as specifically like Anglo-Saxon in the United States. Like Irish and Italian people were
it
not considered
changed.
white
Yeah.
for a long time, and then we identified them differently when they started to assimilate into cultures.
Well,
So
let's stick to like what we have now, not necessarily as much what we used to, I guess. We'll
I
consider
guess
white
we can.
just like what we consider white now, because then it'll get really
Right.
sticky if we start saying like, oh, okay, Irish people didn't used to be white, so like, what do we? You
sure,
get me?
I don't know if there are like
But do you
hard
understand that
biological
the white person
barriers between.
all he had to. Right. Go ahead.
Sorry, what were
I
you saying? The white person didn't.
well, I don't know.
Like
It
all he
doesn't
had to do
seem.
was move out of his neighborhood, and the variation would change, right?
Wait, repeat that. Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Okay, so like all he had to do was move out of that neighborhood, and his situation would change, right? His environmental effects would be different.
Right. But he could still like. I'm not saying I'm not for it. I'm just proposing a hypothetical. Would he not still be able to identify trans race and then now I guess say the N word?
so the answer is just a very simple no. But well, sorry. To the first question, I mean, the question of like permissibility of the N word, I don't think there's any like you know um, inherent status to the permissibility of that. So it's like kind of a different question.
Yeah,
But
that's
as
the
to whether or
issue,
not
like closed circles or public domain, because like you can always say it like to your friends, but you can never say it to anyone else.
yeah,
Like,
so,
what
but
would it matter?
as to the question of like, is he black? I mean, the answer is just very obviously no. I mean, you're already describing him as a white person. Now, can we say that this person is like very much in black culture?
Similar.
Absolutely. To say
Yeah.
that somebody is in black culture is not to say that somebody is black.
Can't we say the same thing about trans women or trans men? That they're, although they're not truly women or men, they're just very much involved in what we consider men or women. So, aka like
No.
a tomboy or like a girly man.
No, because there's not a sort of material history to point to that describes or
Yes, there is.
that is the base of hold on that there is a material history to being a woman, but there is not a material history that tells you what it is to be a woman. So I have to use a philosophy word. You want to look it up, you can. So the point is asking about the ontology of these words. Ontology, it just kind of means like what's the nature of their being. So
Sure.
everything has a material history
I
to
mean,
it, right?
every word can be changed.
Phones have a material history to them, but we don't really say that the ontology of a phone is defined by, the material history that it goes through.
I got a hypothetical that maybe might be something. So, like, imagine that both male and female looked exactly the same. They had the same body types, but the only difference was their genitalia. At some point, we would create the system to be able to identify each person differently, right? Each sex differently. Say, like, okay, that's a woman. That's the person I'm supposed to hit
Wait,
on. This
can you
person.
wait? Is in this hypothetical they have the same bodies, but
Exactly, except for the
just the
genitalia.
genitalia?
Yeah.
But
So, like, if they were naked,
are they
like,
also equally strong and stuff? Because society would, I think, evolve in a different way.
yeah, no, this is hypothetical. But the hypothetical is just to show that we would create these identities and we would create these markers, like whether it be dresses or whether it be like different shoes or different ways of acting to be able to differentiate if we had nothing else to differentiate on. I guess that's the whole
R-
point.
Uh, okay, and well, what would that mean for trans people in that proposed society? I
Well,
guess.
it's just that we're not opting for like 1800s woman. we're opting for the things that are available now in our social circles or our current system, or not system, I guess, current
Culture?
If they had the
pop
exact same
culture.
body
Yeah,
type
pop
like
culture.
that,
Yeah,
Oh, just
then
culture.
you
yeah,
and
culture.
if they had the exact same bodies, then you wouldn't need trans people. Can't you just dress as a girl and now you're considered a girl as a guy?
No, but they would say that your genitalia is the problem.
They would say that your genitalia is the problem,
Yeah, they would say like, hey, you can't dress like a woman because if you do, you're fucking
but they
us up.
wouldn't know that. They would literally have no way, actually have no way of telling that. Neither by voice or by boobs or by like shoulder to hip ratio, kind of. You in that society, there would
How do you
actually
think
be
anyone else
no.
knows that when someone's passing, like it's passed on through words anyway? Like it
Wait,
it can be
what?
known though, right? Like if
It
someone
can't.
ends up
It can't.
having that
You'll never know. You'll
interaction,
never know what someone has in between their legs unless you're gonna sleep with them.
yeah, unless you're
Unless
gonna
you, I
sleep
guess,
with them,
unless you
or
grow with
unless
them, I
anyone
guess.
else that try to sleep with them spread the word, right? You know, like
Right.
Well, I
Real
think
or
same thing as
evil?
being clocked
Can't.
today.
But
You
I
know,
don't understand. In that society, can't we just make it acceptable for anyone to, I guess, wear whatever they want to wear,
the
and then
society
the
was
only
just
purpose to identify your gender, which would just be to say I'm a guy because I have a penis, I'm a girl because I have a vagina,
no,
only
the
because
hypothetical.
I would identify you to potential sex partners or dating partners.
I
The
think
hypothetical was just to show you that the differences, like the things that we deem as women for this, would be like social behaviors after the fact. They wouldn't be like
That's what we're
in here.
doing now, isn't it? Like, I don't think your genitals matter anymore. You can be a trans woman without your genitals mattering, right? Like that's basically where we're at now. Yeah, like I
No,
understand
I
the
think
different
some
body
people have
types now,
problems
but
with like trans or any kind of pronouns that are outside of that. But
Tree
like,
lady, we're talking about transracialism, by the way.
fun topic.
yeah, I'll let her go.
Well, if she wants to.
I'll wait till I have more context before I chime in with my
Yeah.
super informed gamer take.
um, what were we saying that you can't inherit the past
Yep.
conditions and what was it materials
Yeah.
of a different race, right? So like
Yeah.
you can't inherit the history, I guess, of oppression,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And then
They do the same thing for
your
women.
family's descended wealth wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able
Basically.
to change that about yourself by being trans race. But
Correct.
I was just asking the question that women have suffered plenty, right, in history, and you wouldn't be able to inherit the same qualities a woman has if you used to be a man.
True.
So that argument doesn't work because it also applies to trans women. When you transition to being a woman,
Yeah.
you don't automatically now have a history of being oppressed and treated a certain way, and you
Well,
shouldn't be
yeah.
able to identify with like the women's rights movements of like
Why not?
the 70s once you transition to a woman.
Well, and that's what's so clever,
I mean,
really, about the
Because
whole argument.
you changed to an experience that isn't yours. It's the same thing
no,
with the
I'm not
white
talking
guy
about the
going
experience,
trans
but
black.
you're saying I can't be an advocate for something just because I haven't had
No,
the experience of it.
no. That's not what I meant. Sorry, I must have misspoke. I meant you can't identify with their oppression. You can't identify with their, like experience as the history of a gender, kind of. Just the same way where it's like a white guy trying to be trans black wouldn't be able to like identify. He would he wouldn't be able to get offended at like being called the N word by another white person. I feel like that's a better
Matt
example.
Swatch, real quick
Yeah,
question. Are you
yeah.
like trying to like can you tell me what you're trying to argue right now?
I'm just asking questions. I didn't start this.
Okay.
I'm just asking questions
What?
because they brought up that
Anti-Federalist
transracialism
started
doesn't
it.
work because of the past experiences and oppression and whatnot. But that also applies to transgenders, so I don't think that's a valid argument against transracialism. I'm not
No,
arguing
like
for it
like
or
okay,
against
hold
it.
on, wait. So it's gonna depend on like what we mean by transracial, like what we mean when we say like race, like what we're referring to, right? Um, because like I think like it's totally possible for like a gentile to become a Jew, right? Um,
Um, okay.
do you disagree?
No. I was just running the words through my brain.
Okay, yeah, for like a non-Jewish person to become Jewish,
Yeah.
right? I think that's totally
Yeah.
possible, right?
Yeah, but that's a religion.
And it's a race.
Yeah, but
If
it's
you
not the
exist on
same.
DGG,
They no.
okay, so
There's
this
a
is why
difference
I
between
said,
Jewish
hold on,
religion and
wait,
Jewish race.
hold on, wait. This is why I said it depends on what we're talking about when we talk about race, right?
Okay.
Now, and now I'm going to stop being like a gamer, a DGG logic lord. Most people, when they say race, they mean what is the color of your skin, and what do your eyes look like, right? That is
Yeah.
that is like 99% of it.
Yeah. I would probably agree with that.
I disagree with that.
You disagree? What would you
Yeah.
consider race?
Well, your eyes and your face and your skin could look very Asian, but you would still be in the right to say like, oh no, I'm Mongolian, or oh no, I'm Russian, and people would go like, oh, he's
Wait.
Russian. No one would go, no, he's
Mongolians
Asian.
not Asian?
Or
But
I don't
there's
know.
Asians in Russia.
Okay,
I mean,
pretend that there
that would
was a
be more
guy
like,
whose
like wouldn't
lineage was from the
Russian be
Caribbean.
an ethnicity?
yeah.
Well-
Aren't people in like super Eastern Russian Asian anyway?
Okay, so if you're a British guy who looks really Asian, but someone mistakes you as Asian, you're like, oh no, I'm British. No one goes
Isn't that
like,
also
no, you're
ethnicity?
Asian because your eyes and your skin tone
I
look
think you're just
Asian.
conflating ethnicity and race.
Race, yeah.
Yeah. I think we agree. I think it's just a little bit of confusion because yeah, you're right. But they would acknowledge that their race is Asian on any government paper they put on.
Yeah.
Like an American-born Asian on like when they're filling out like, let me think of an example. Like their SATs, right? There are often these surveys that ask you what race you are. They'll
Yes,
put Asian.
but correct me if I'm wrong. We don't
Yeah, what's that?
test for that. That's entirely self-ID.
It's
Yes.
totally yeah,
And
that's my
they'll
argument.
self-ID as Asian. They'll self-ID as Asian.
I don't think they would.
Some people
I think
So
people.
some will, some won't.
I think the vast
Right.
majority will because the options are like white, Hispanic, black, Asian. I think
Indigenous.
like maybe indigenous, and maybe there's one more, but those are like
No,
the 4 or 5
they're big.
options,
Sure.
right?
There's an other option.
I think 90% of Asians are going to mark Asian,
Yeah,
even
but
if they're
I-
born U.S. born.
What are the 10% gonna mark?
I don't know, other.
Whatever they
Oh.
self-ID as. Or
Yeah,
close to.
the point is American isn't there, right?
Okay,
Or neither
so-
is British.
different.
So
Or
hold
Russian.
on, wait, hold on. I'm going to take the shortcut for this entire conversation, and I'm going to save us 3 hours. Right?
Please.
Yes.
The shortcut to this conversation is every single argument you can make against transracialism only requires the replacing of 1 or 2 words to become an argument that is just as valid against trans people, right? So I
Right.
take the in my opinion, super bad faith position of saying, yeah, you know what? Being transracial is just as valid as being transgender. And I say it's super bad faith because I do not believe there's any like that there's any like meaningful population percentage of the population who actually like desperately wants to be transracial, right? And yeah, that's basically it. So you will
Yeah,
be able to
I would agree.
always
That's
point to like
Besides
racial
those,
qualify, or you'll be able to point to like 1 or 2 weird people, but those 1 or 2 weird people will always be those 1 or 2 weird people, rather than
they'll
like, trans people
they'll
are very
identify as
meaningful.
trans alien
I don't
as
know
well.
if that's
Yeah.
like a solid
Well,
argument
hey,
though, because at one point,
there
like
has to be a solid argument.
there were very few like people who wanted to be transgender, and like the reason for that was a lot of like the pushback that people would give they came out. So we don't actually know how
Okay.
many of these people there are,
So
right?
so okay, if there is a meaningful population of the of our like society who are transracial, who like desperately I'm gonna continue conflating the trans experience with the transracial experience, who desperately like need to dye their skin black, or who feel terrible about the fact that their skin isn't pale enough.
That
Then
happens.
like this attitude that even though I'm giving it in bad faith, will, if adopted by wider society, lead to more people being happier.
I think you're right. I think it's just that there's value in being able to identify trans people right now, but there's no or little to no value
So,
in
Rhett, actually, we can go to
I
like
don't
a
know.
well, I guess I just can't fucking talk to you. But, like, we can go to like an example right now. So like in certain East Asian countries, being like white or lighter skin
Yeah,
is
that's
like
what I was gonna say.
really
That
is
it's a huge
really
thing. Yeah,
incentivized. It's like a huge thing over there. Right?
Everywhere.
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
like
In
not,
India, they sell, or in South Africa, even they sell a lot of skin whitening products
Bleaching.
and skin
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
bleaching.
yeah.
Even, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But I don't know if they consider themselves transracial at some
No,
point.
So
hold on.
like
Great. So like
That's
this is.
societal.
Sorry. Go ahead, Octavian.
So like the thing is like you're saying like, oh, there's like already these certain population of people, we already have a problem with it. Well, like these people may not see themselves as transracial, but they are trying to see themselves as a lighter skin, which like is kind of like not saying that, but like when we already talked about like people only really see this through like a couple like physical features that they want, right, or that like they see, right? Like I don't know. Also like you could talk about like how people who are albino like already like are both like in a weird point where they're both white, like where you could look at them and they're white, but also like they have certain features that are like, oh, they're like you can understand that they're black, really. Like, and it's really interesting to like talk about like those type of things. But you can also say like, yo, those people like even though like they're light skin or white, like those are like black people. Like
Well,
even though it's like hard to say that, right?
I want to go back real quick to something Tree Lady said because I didn't understand it. Like before we got on this different topic, like you were saying that like if a significant portion of the population like wants this would lead to like more happiness. I don't understand.
So what I said is like if my attitude, my bad faith opinion on this, that like being transracial is just as valid as being transgender, is widely adopted in our society, hopefully without the bad faith part, right? And there is a secret number of our population, right, who do want to transition and live as a different race, but can't because they're worried about pushback from the greater society at whole. That pushback from greater society at whole disappears, then those people will be able to live like more authentic, happier lives as a result.
well,
Oh,
yeah, that
okay.
was.
I would just say
I
that I
don't
don't
know
have to
how.
Hey,
I
defend
don't know how
anything that
to.
starts with trans
I
outside of
just
being
don't.
trans woman.
I don't know how to engage with this because you keep saying that you're acting in bad faith. So I'm like,
Because
do you want me to engage, or is this like just a thought experiment?
you can engage if you want to. Like for me, I viscerally on an emotional level, I'm really annoyed every single time the transracial topic is brought up because 99 out of 100 times it is a bad faith attack on trans people, right?
I,
And they're
I think we're just asking questions here.
yes.
I
So
hope you don't feel attacked.
no, I
I
don't
had
feel
brought that
attacked,
up, Tree
right?
Lady. I had brought up whoever came up with the concept of a trans race. I feel like its entire purpose was to um, basically like make it was like a fuck. How would I explain it? Like it was like to sow a bad seed within the
Yeah.
left. You know what I
I don't
mean?
think so.
Yeah.
I think I know there's videos on like I don't remember what
So
show it was, but there's trans
Sometimes
race
people
people
do
on
things in
TV.
good faith,
yeah.
and they have wrong it has wrong outcomes. You know.
So
Well, does
I
it
don't know.
have to
It's
be
like
bad
very
faith though? Like,
this
at
is
the
like
very least, emotionally speaking, I think the idea of being trans race is like fucking stupid, right? On an
I don't.
emotional
well, Tree
level, I think
Lady,
it's
True.
fucking stupid.
Okay,
But
but
on
Tree
a
Lady,
on a logic level, on an idea of like attitudes we should adjust or why I can or can't justify it, right? I can't like justify why like personally why being transracial is different. I've met a few people who have made arguments that at the time I'll nod along to and say, yeah, I agree. But I
Really?
guess they never sunk in because I can't sum them up.
I
Yeah.
Right?
don't know.
Can't either.
It's kind of like this, right? Like we can like model like neurotypical brain waves of males and females and see a difference. It's not like
That means
overwhelming.
nothing though.
It say what?
That means nothing though. That's just the current state of the brain as
Means
it is now.
what
It
does
doesn't.
mean nothing mean?
It means nothing to like showing nurture versus nature, is what I mean.
Wait. When you're graphing like an average, right? Like how much nurture versus I don't even know if nurture versus nature is like a real dichotomy or not. I don't really care if it is. Right? We can see
Okay.
a neurotypical female and we can see a neurotypical male and we can tell that like you might have been born biologically something, but your brain activity is neurotypically this, right? We can see that. This is something that can be defined. It's not even hard.
But the
But
Um,
we
argument
can't.
or
right, but there's
the
no
hinting
difference
of that
between
is
races.
can I
basically
ask a
showing that it's
hypothetical?
genetic. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
Sorry, Tree Lady, you had said a while ago, but you said a Gentile can convert to Judaism, and even non-religious Jews consider that person Jewish. So, if if that like attitude was taken on by wider society and we started to think of race as something that was an identity that people chose, like I, I don't. Would that be the worst thing? I don't know how that is different than making the decision as a wider society to like adopt the view that gender is something we can choose and how we present ourselves. I don't understand what's so wrong with it.
We convince ourselves that olive skin doesn't matter.
I mean, but like, there's no basis for it, right? There's no scientific basis for saying, oh, well, you're typically aligned with African Americans. Like, this doesn't exist, right? Like, it's a construct that's made up. And I think once we get away from like the scientific nature of things, we start making shit up. I mean, you can make up whatever you want.
King of Hearts, I think you're like currently overstating how developed the research is into trans people's brains.
Yeah, I don't think it's anywhere where we can like know the difference.
Maybe I am overstating it, but it doesn't seem a stretch to say that like you can neurotypically align one way.
Sorry, I was discounting it. My bad. Sorry.
This doesn't even like require a leap of logic, right? But there is no neurotypical African American. There's no neurotypical like white man that is of any real difference. There is no significant difference here. There's nothing to really measure. So like saying that this is something that can be brought about by brain chemistry is just not the case, right?
No one's saying brain chemistry. I'm saying it's environmental. That you can look at a psychopath's mind, but you don't know how it got there.
I mean, so we kind of do, right?
We do, but it's not based on anything that's genetic. It's whether it's abuse or something like that. So when
but there can be genetic predispositions. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things that can happen in your life.
You're talking about the MAO gene, something like that. But the thing is, even with that, there's epigenetics where you have to actually trigger these things. And one of these triggers is basically like you're abused or something like that.
I agree. I agree with this, but this doesn't have anything to do with what I'm saying.
I think the point.
Sorry, go ahead.
We know how to identify a psychopath in an MRI, but being able to like discern or figure out how they got to like how that mind developed in that way is more like a more psychological. And the psychological inferences, like trigger words, for instance, has a lot to do with conditioning. One of the big conditioning that I find in current day is like terms like in the current discourse would be like when Republicans want to talk about CRT, the inference and bringing up CRT a million times and then attaching it to this boogeyman is to condition people to have a response to the word or to the CRT inference. And by constantly using the word wokeism or wokeness, they try to attach the two together. And therefore, they can condition people to think, oh, CRT equals this. And then this is bad because they condition the person to think this way.
Okay, yeah, this is true, but
I'm linking it, but
yeah, I think if we can observe people in various cultures, right, and come up with neurotypics from that, I mean, that would inform us a lot. If there's no significant deviation from women who experience, life in America as opposed to women who experience it in Saudi Arabia or experience it in the worst spots of Nigeria, right? Like this gives us good inferences.
But then someone could come in and say,
that's not in the study, though.
Transitioned 2 years ago and you've been living as a woman for 2 years and your brain doesn't MRI scan like a biological woman, then you're not. You know what I mean? That argument could get flipped so easily.
Oh, bro, like here's the hot take of the night. That doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Yeah, I'm so confused.
I understand, like you don't care about nature and nurture, but a lot of people do, and that's the whole.
That is the pro gatekeeping take I was looking for here.
Were you all having a conversation about transracialism as like an example, or is it like in the context of having a conversation about like transgender?
My hot take is that you don't have to ever like I don't have to argue everything that has trans in front of it, whether it be transhumanism or trans whatever. Like I just have to argue trans females. Like that's the only point like I have to stick on. Everything else is just absurd to me.
Oh, no, I apologize. Yeah. So I'm confused because I came in while somebody was talking about like transracialism. and
Oh,
there
no,
seemed to
sorry,
be
go
some
ahead.
like commentary made there, and then it switched back, and I couldn't tell if like the overall discussion was just about like transgenderism.
It
Someone
was
asked a
So,
question about
and then
transracialism
like
initially.
transracialism.
I
My
mean, there's
initial
comparisons being
my
made
in-
here, right? Oh.
my initial question was, can anyone substantiate an argument for why they'd be anti-transracialism but pro-transgenderism? Why they'd accept one identity but not the other?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would just
My-
be like, I think there's a scientific basis for transgenderism. I don't think there's a scientific basis at all for
Can you
transracialism.
Hold on,
explain the
wait, 1
scientific
second.
basis
No,
for
wait,
transgenderism?
wait. I want to
I'm not
expand
big
on
on
that
the
real quick.
scientific.
Let's imagine there was. Let's imagine for a second there was like no scientific basis for being trans, right? That the whole male brain, female body, female brain, male body thing, that whole thing just it wasn't real. It didn't exist, and we know this for a fact.
Okay.
And you had a group of people who did genuinely, despite all this, find living as the opposite gender a more fulfilling life and a happier life. Would you argue that they shouldn't be allowed to do that?
No, even with transracialism, like you do whatever the fuck you want. I don't really care.
Would you argue that that they shouldn't be protected from discrimination?
On what basis?
Oh, well, people discriminating against them because they're trans.
No, wait, no. Like even transracial people, I don't think should be discriminated against, right? Or
Okay.
people who
hold
think
on,
they're
are
transracial
people
or whatever.
legitimately
He's
transracial?
pro-trans, by the way.
Hold on. Just because like I don't think there's a scientific basis, so I don't really care to support it, doesn't mean that I think these people should be discriminated against, right? Like, these are two
The
very
same
different
way.
things.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. But are people actually transracial in like a genuine fashion, or is this just like?
There's probably one or two like people you can point at who are genuinely like transracial.
Well,
Like Rachel Dolezal is the only example I can pull up off the top of my head, probably because I've never gone looking for more examples, but she seems genuinely transracial. But the
Here's the
question
thing.
is, it like a
I don't.
phenomenon that occurs in wider society that like seems to occur like throughout like human history, the way trans people seem to occur throughout human history? I don't think so.
I got a question.
It feels like the wider argument made for transracialism is like simply just to undermine the
Yeah.
concept of like transgenderism, right?
Yes.
Like
I think it's
A lot
worth
of it
talking
is.
about.
even if I was to
So-
grant that like Rachel Dolezal would be like an example you might be able to look at and be like, hey, genuinely like this person just connects with like this culture, therefore they've shifted their appearance to match more closely like how they feel
And to advocate for them.
right, which is fine,
So-
but like genuinely, and like I could probably even bring up examples like somebody else had mentioned, like outside of the
King.
US you probably have like countries where like people look to have like lighter complexions because of the history of some of these countries and
It's the
just
overall beauty standard.
So
yeah.
honest,
Right.
honest
Um,
question: is transracialism actually just transculturalism?
Well, that's what
It
I was
has
going
to
to get
be.
to. I
It
don't
has to
feel
be.
like it's actually about like like I am this like genuine.
'Cause-
When I hear genuine people make an argument, it's more that they're like attached to the culture that they're relating.
It has to be the
Yeah,
culture.
but
Yeah,
how
you're right.
many
I think
conservatives?
the
No.
distinguish.
You could argue the exact same thing about trans women. They
Yeah, how
say
many
they're just
conservatives
attached to
say it's
the
just
woman culture.
But I
masculine?
would agree with that.
I mean, but even if it's
Then
true, like
what's the need to change genitals?
Wait, hold on. So if you're making the argument in good faith, I don't see the problem with making that argument, right? Once again, transracialism seems like an argument for the most part. The majority of the arguments are built to undermine.
That would be my
transgenderism,
guess too.
right? Like
That
I,
100%, dude.
so
But I
It's
still
we're
think
not,
the
there's value in
MRA version of that shit. Yeah.
so even calling it even calling it transculturalism doesn't like. Once again, if you're having the good faith conversation about like what people are actually connecting to,
No.
I
Okay,
think
the
it
good faith
actually
conversation
strengthens.
is conversation is just there's no trans race because it doesn't have value in society, but there is value in accepting transgenders in society. I understand
What?
that. I'm okay.
What?
No. Hold on.
We
Hold on.
understand
So,
that there's trans people in society, trans gender people in society, so it's worth accepting it because there's value to be had there, but there's no value or little value to be had in accepting trans race people in society currently.
I don't
I
think
mean,
that's
this
the
is
issue
about
with that at all.
I just think it's an interesting conversation.
practically don't exist. There's no movement for them. So what? Like, that's basically the point of what he's saying. Like, this is not a
That's what I'm
movement.
saying. Yeah, I understand that, but
this
it's still an
value
interesting
Until it
conversation to have.
becomes a
value
movement, until
basis.
it's a real thing that real people are clamoring for, it practically doesn't exist, and it's only a deflection from accepting
Yeah.
transgender people.
So
On
this
top of
is
Might
that,
be
majority
on
of
value
top of that,
for it
we
might
already
be
have
interesting,
protection in like Canada and the U.S. for discrimination on the basis of race and ethnicity,
I just
and
think
that
it's
does
cool to talk
indirectly
about.
cover transracial people.
I mean,
It's just in accepting transgender people, do you have to accept trans race now? That's basically
absolutely
where we're at.
not.
That's where we're at.
Absolutely not.
That's
Yeah,
the
it's like
actual
it's not an
this
conversation.
either
is
or.
a
There are
weird.
tons
It's not
It
if there's
doesn't
value in
exist.
trans race.
like
Wait,
There's an
Rat.
assumption that these things are analogous, and they're not.
Wait, first of all,
Hold on.
Rat, can you display anywhere where like this is happening on a scale?
It doesn't
on any
matter. We're not arguing.
No,
We're not talking about whether it's happening. We're
Right, but they
arguing
do
whether
have
no,
the
it's
that's this is what.
analysis.
possible.
Hold
We're
on,
They
just
do
talking
have
about
the
the
hold on.
analysis.
possibility of it.
Rat. Stop. Right, for just a second. So we're comparing this thing to like a very real thing that is a very real movement that's occurring, right?
Yes.
I get where you're trying to go with this, but it seems like in order to take, once again, it seems like there's been some agreement that like if there's individuals that relate to like a culture and the thing that they're trying to achieve is a closer connection to that, right? Like if it's a good faith attempt to like feel closer to whatever the culture you grow up with, or
I grew up black, yeah, like that.
yeah, then it doesn't seem like that's like the good faith argument doesn't seem like there's much of an issue with allowing somebody to like identify themselves that way.
I don't know, man. Like even transgenderism isn't based on like how you were raised. Oh, I grew up black. Like transgender females didn't necessarily grow up female, but that's not the basis.
Stop. There's a connection to the culture, right? Like so I can't recall who said like I grew up black. It doesn't mean like I actually grew up black. It means I grew up connecting to like this experience. Right?
Yeah, it's like the experience of the neighborhood or the environment that you're in.
I
you can move out of there and not be that anymore.
I don't think that being black is necessarily constituting a cultural experience. Right? There are
this is a good.
We're just saying
like
generally.
we're talking about like the good faith argument for this, right? We're trying to like
I'm trying to I'm getting a counter argument. Do you not like that? Do you not want me to do that? I can quit if you so choose.
No, just go.
I mean, so like the idea that being black is a cultural thing in and of itself, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, people in Africa have a different culture than black people in America.
Oh my god, that's a different argument. That's a different conversation.
Okay,
I think we're all on the same page about what growing up black means. Okay.
No,
I think we're all on the same page.
Hold on. No. Wait.
Identifying as a woman is also significantly different in Saudi Arabia and the United States.
Yeah, so I'd like to ask you, when somebody says I grew up black, do they have to go, I grew up black in Africa, or I grew up black in the U.S.? Like,
I don't know.
Mean
I
different,
don't know
or does this mean different things to people? Like, it's contextual, right?
Of the same race.
I don't think that growing up black means anything. I don't think it has any value. I don't know what the statement even fucking means.
Fuck, man. And now we're diving into like a topic that's not even really a fucking thing.
Yeah. We
can understand the reality of today.
You said
we can understand the reality of today.
Right. I said something in response to somebody bringing up transracialism in a discussion about like how we accept people in general who
like comparatively to trans people.
Yeah. If you say something and you don't want me to push back, that's cool, bro. Just
it's not that I don't want you to push back. It's now that you're making like a weird argument, and I'm simply was discussing it in terms of like if the person you're talking to is like good faith about this thing, then they're probably connecting to X, right? I wasn't making an argument about like anything further than that. I was trying to define when we say transracialism, I tend to believe
And
that
I'm just
people are
saying to you,
probably connecting to the culture
all I'm
in
saying
which
to you,
they're coming up in.
Benny, all I'm saying to
Like,
you is if somebody says
No,
to
King
me,
of
"Oh, I grew up black," I'm gonna be like, "That
You're
doesn't make any
missing
sense
the
to me."
whole fucking
King of
point,
Hearts, you're
King.
going on a tangent. You're going on a tangent because if someone says,
What part? Okay, cool. What part am I missing? You tell me.
So
What
okay,
part am I
if
missing?
someone
when
wants to identify with Nigerian culture, then they go to be trans race, to be black, to better identify with that culture. It doesn't matter if it's Nigeria or African American or like whatever. It's the point is that we're talking about trans race, and then with that to identify better with some culture where that I guess race is predominant.
No,
Why?
he
But it
did
doesn't
it.
really matter.
No, the reason he did it is because, if you were to actually make a good faith attempt, like say someone was genuinely like being genuine about, this whole, transracial thing or whatever, they wouldn't even say that they're transracial. They would just say, like, does that make sense? Like a good faith attempt that would indicate that the person is in good faith would be like, I grew up black, or like more with the culture
exactly.
rather than with the race, I think is what he's trying to say.
dude, the problem with good faith is that it has to end.
The whole point. No, 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 no. This is a bad faith argument. So,
Oh my god.
first of all, coming from like Charlie Kirk, right? There's probably a lot of there
Maybe a little
coming
Ladies
bit.
from
and gentlemen, we
right.
have
So
abandoned
Maybe.
the
coming
debate, and we are now
all
solely talking about the meta debate.
right. So like all I was trying to figure out is like whether or not
Definitely.
you would even refer to it as transracialism. I personally think that if somebody was making a good faith argument about like what they were connecting to and they were using the term transracialism, what they would be referring to is like the culture that they grew up with and recognizing that somehow that's tied to um
A race.
Transgenderism.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
because none of
I
these
hear you, but
racial arguments happen inside of a bubble that never mentions trans females. You ever notice that?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
no, that's
uh,
the whole point of
Obviously
the
they're going to
conversation
piggyback on
is
this,
if we
right?
can accept trans women, does that mean we have to now accept trans race?
Yes,
That's
but
the
I'm saying that's the only
yeah.
conversation that's happening.
weird
That's the
little
only
Because it's not
coincidence.
conversation.
relevant. It's not relevant. It's just a hypothetical. It's just like a whatever. Like this is not. This conversation
Guys,
doesn't have
This
a
is
real
Guys,
world
hold on,
impact because
wait,
trans race
wait,
people don't really exist.
guys.
of course these
I'm
people,
high fiving you,
of
Shree.
course, transracial people or people who believe transracialism is a thing are going to hinge a lot of their arguments in the same fashion that transgenderism is hinged on because it worked, right? Like, of course they're going to do that, right? Guess what? Pedophiles do the same thing with the gay argument, right? It doesn't mean that they're comparable. It just means that they saw that this worked, so they're going to try the same tactic. That's not a surprise.
Perhaps.
I mean, I think the difference is there's a much more obvious difference when it comes to pedophiles versus gay people than there is between transracialism and transgender and being transgender.
I
No,
think we
Also,
should
it's
I
stick
not.
think
to
there's a lot more
transgender
anime
and
fans
trans
than there
race.
is transracial
Holy
people.
fuck.
Wait, did someone just say there isn't like an obvious difference
No,
between those parallels?
No,
race and
I think
gender
we
are
should
two
stick to.
completely different things.
I think we should stick to trans race and transgender.
Please don't draw comparisons.
I'm curious what harm any of you think would come about if we started using race in as a way of expressing how we identify in society instead of
I,
a
I
like
can
biologically determined thing.
I can tell you right now, the harm is going to come when people get real pissed off when a whole bunch of white folks say, "Oh, I'm black." I'm like, really? When was the last time you were discriminated against? You tell me that, huh?
Yeah, there's
Okay, but you
that.
don't
But
say
Okay,
it
hold
like
on, but
this,
like,
right?
isn't
but
it
like,
Right,
would
happening
you
with
be
so
okay?
the feminists right now? Like
But
that
like, haven't
group
you
of
ever heard of
extreme feminists?
colorism? Like, do you think
Of
like people
course,
should
I've
be
heard
gate
of
kept out of
colorism. I
blackness?
lived through
Hold
colorism.
on,
What
wait.
you talking about?
Do you think like black people should be gate kept out of blackness because they like don't like sufficiently fail the paper bag test?
What's the
Listen,
paper bag test?
Paper bag test
don't.
used to be a test used in the United States to see if you were white or not. You weren't white if your skin was darker than a standard issue paper bag.
Holy
First,
shit! I
first
don't
of
think I'm
all,
Oh,
white.
this idea of
oh.
dark skin, light skin has existed for quite some time, right? And guess what? That's not going anywhere.
Hold
So
on, like, do you think black people who pass for white shouldn't be allowed to be call themselves black?
who pass for white. I don't
Yeah.
care I don't care where we fall on that person.
No, you literally just said that there's going to be a ton of people who are going to be like super upset when white people say claim to be black.
That's correct.
Even though they've never been discriminated against. Now, there's so many ways it can attack you on this, but are you going to do the same thing for like black people who aren't sufficiently black enough?
Wait. But
If you run into a black person who's like pale enough that they've never experienced racial discrimination in their life, would you tell them they can't be black, that they're not black, that their definition is like don't have?
Do you want to answer, or do you want to just rant? Which one would you like?
Both. I mean,
okay, you go ahead. Continue your rant. And let me know when you're done. Let me know when you're done.
Isn't that the same thing as like TERFs?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, like TERFs, where they exclude trans women because they haven't had the same. Well, I don't know why. I think it's because they haven't had the same oppression, right? They haven't
the same lived experience, or the, like
the same lived exactly.
It is already a fact.
If you bottle that shit down, like they just like, I don't like trans women. That's it. In the end,
it's already a fact that lighter skinned people have it better than darker skinned people in a various number of metrics, right? This is not even like controversial.
Yeah,
now, whether you're black or not, it's not hinged on that. Nobody's hinging it on that, right? That being said, of course there are black people out there who are dark skinned who don't like light skinned people because they feel like light skinned people get shit handed to them. Those people exist, yes. And if a light skinned
Oh my God!
Really?
Stop! King of Hearts, ignore her. Just finish what you're saying, please.
Okay.
This is an ad hom.
You do both.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I don't even know how she would know what skin tone I am, but anyway, so
just finish what you're saying. Just finish what you're saying.
With this point, right? Of course, they're going to be dark skinned people that say, "Hey, if a light skinned person says, "Oh, I am just as discriminated against you. I have the same problems as you. I experience the same things as you." They're going to be like, "No, you don't. Statistically, you don't." Right?
Right. What if they've got it worse because they're not?
Trans women don't say they have an identical experience to cis women, and any trans women who do, like theoretically, they're fucking stupid, right? But but I'm not gatekeeping their womanhood or their transness from them.
Wait, when did I gatekeep on this basis? Right? Somebody started this. We literally started this whole tangent. You didn't even listen to what I said.
This argument is whether we should gatekeep on racial identity.
Somebody asked me what the problem would be, right? What issues would arise in society. It has nothing to do with whether I agree with these issues, right?
So you don't agree with this issue, and you think that would be unjust?
I don't personally care if you identify as transracial. I don't give a fuck about you.
Transracial is not an issue that has arisen. It's not an issue at all. You pretending it is.
But it doesn't matter.
God, dude. We're just having the conversation, dude.
I know, but like you guys are screaming about a thing that's literally never been.
No, ladies just taking things personally, bro.
Flipper, let's relax, okay? What I'm saying is that I personally do not care how you identify, whether you identify as male or female, white or black. I don't give a fuck about you. I don't know who you are. I don't care. It doesn't affect my life, right? Somebody asked me what problems would arise. I just talked about the problems that would arise. That's it.
So, King of Hearts, I got a question for you that might end up kind of forcing you to take a position. Do you think it should be illegal for businesses to fire people for claiming to be transracial?
Yes.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yes,
I was going to say that.
Do you think it should be illegal?
All the trans stuff. You guys are misinterpreting him.
Okay,
wait, can you explain?
Can I just say something? If you're a trans person, you should never debate transracialism because transracialism only exists as a deflection from acceptance of transgender people.
Slipper, look, we understand that there's no value in transracialism.
This is a completely negative and unproductive
We understand that. We understand. Okay, that we understand that. The point is, the point of the conversation is, should we accept transracial people on the same
who don't exist and who only are made up to make it so that we don't accept transgender people?
I mean, it's possible for them to exist. They do exist. There's very, very, very few of them.
When it's a thing, I'll accept it.
You know what? Honestly,
it's not about accepting. It's about talking about whether it's possible to accept it.
This is not how race works, okay?
And
race
who knows how?
That's why we're talking about it.
Let me just race doesn't become more specific, okay? We're not going to racialize people further. Race doesn't work like that. We're going to racialize people less. People are going to learn that race is not real, okay? More likely than they're going to learn that we're going to put two races inside of one body. No, this is fucking ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I feel like that was just an
Just
argument
because
for
things
arguments
are
for
the way they
gender.
are.
Gender
Race
isn't
is going to
real.
go away. It's
So
not
is
going to
gender.
get. It's not going to get more specific.
Isn't that an argument for
Gender should.
So is
transracialism?
gender.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an argument for transgender.
People are not going to
Transracialism.
consider
you
themselves
just
white
you just
or
made
black.
the argument for
the whole
transracialism.
It's not that people
Yeah,
are going to.
we both drink water.
Are going to want to
That's
be
not an
black.
argument.
It's that white people are not going to consider themselves white at all.
Then we should let people
Okay, but
identify
you
however
could
they want, right?
you could also argue that the categories of genders are also broadening to the point where they're meaningless.
No.
They're
Where it's
not
becoming
meaningless now, though.
it's
We have to
becoming
understand that the
now. You're
world
right.
is
It's
the way it is now,
race
right?
is also not meaning race is also not meaningless now. I'm just saying you could
So
argue
once
that in the
again,
future
the
that's where we're
problem-
going.
The problem
But
with
it's
the
all
question
social.
that you're asking, right, is
you.
that like if this were to occur, I strongly believe that people wouldn't use the term transracialism. They would just identify with like the culture, right? Like you would have a shift from, even if it started out being like, I'm going to be transracial, right?
Yeah, why do you got to put
probably
trans in front of it?
Yes,
it would
yes.
shift. It would shift to different,
like trans, like African American or
label.
something. Right, I
No,
understand.
no,
I understand. Or like it's
Why
more
you
like
got to
transculturalism. Right.
What you're explaining is
doing
being
that.
a weeb, right? What you're explaining is being a weeb. It's just being very into another culture, and that exists now. It already exists. You can do
Okay,
that
but
now.
okay. But if a weeb were to then get surgery to look more Asian, right? Would they now be a? This is the real question. Would they now be a protected class?
No. This is
Or
this is,
yeah,
this
or
is,
would
this
you?
is what I'm saying
Would
is
they
that
be?
this is a,
Yeah.
like.
Wait,
do you realize why I'm
understand that
saying
you
like
can't
there's
discriminate
no
on
reason
people?
for me to engage with
can't-
this because it's
Wait,
only
what? Okay,
Okay,
so
then that's not an argument.
Rat, it's already illegal to discriminate
Let me ask you a
based on
question.
transgenderism.
What race would somebody become in which they wouldn't be protected class? I don't understand this.
Right. This is already a protected class.
What is trans race?
No, race in general.
Yeah, exactly. But if a weeb has surgery to become Asian, is he or she now a protected class?
It's irrelevant. Yes, they were
doesn't matter.
before,
It doesn't
and
matter.
they would be afterward.
So then the government would acknowledge them as trans race. Is the point?
Stop. Listen to what I'm saying to you. Race is a protected category already.
Yes.
So prior to whatever change they made.
Right, but he's basically saying would they consider him Asian for real?
Yeah, would the government then consider him Asian as no? Because if you're white, you're not a protected class.
Dude,
no,
I
that's
literally
you think white people?
I just want to let you know that if I got a census document, I could literally mark any fucking race on it.
No, you could.
Yes,
if you went to dinner,
if
you went to dinner,
that's
if
true.
you went to dinner with someone,
identifying.
Like,
if you
I
went to
don't get
dinner
what
with
you're
someone who had surgeries to make themselves look more Asian, and they asked you to refer to them as Asian, would you?
Yeah, I'd be like, I don't get. Yeah, if that's what makes you fucking happy.
Why
If
would
you identify with that culture, if that's your lived experience, right?
Okay,
and
if
you
you
want
had Benihana, if you had surgery to become black, this is where my previous question came in.
These
Would you
things are not
would you allow them to
analogous.
say the
They're
N
not
word? Would you allow
analogous.
them?
Your gender is not
Brad,
analogous. Your
this is
geography
Would
of
you
your,
allow a
of your
trans black
ancestry.
person to say
So,
the N word?
Rat, this
your
is the
gender
exact-
is
this
not
is-
analogous to
Oh my
the
God, we're not
geography of
talking
your
about it.
ancestry.
We're not talking about.
So, Rat,
These
We're
two
not talking
things
about
are not analogous.
Wait, to
keep
answer
trying to
your
pair 'em
question,
together.
Rat, to answer your question,
Yeah.
the thing that you just asked me is the exact fucking question that people ask to deflect from the legitimacy of transgenders.
That's not a real argument.
It's
I'm
the
not
exact
deflecting.
scenario.
I'm asking you to entertain a hypothetical.
Stop. The thing
You
that
have to
you're doing right
you have
now
to validate
delegitimizes the experience of transgenderism.
I'm not even talking about
like
transgenderism. I'm asking you if someone transitions to become a black guy
right,
surgically.
but you haven't
You'd be allowed to say the N word.
that these things are analogous. You haven't proved that gender and the geography of your ancestry are analogous to begin with.
Wait, first of all,
What are you talking about?
you don't have to become black to be able
exactly
to
what
say
I'm
the
talking
N word. All right, you can say it. The consequence of doing so might change if your skin color changed.
Yeah, not
That would happen.
Societally
If you moved out of
You're
any
acting
circle
as
you're
if
in.
Jesus,
gender
you're nitpicking.
and the geography of your ancestry are the same thing and can be compared when they can't. And you haven't demonstrated that they're analogous. that your gender and the geography of your ancestry are the same and can be compared in this way.
How would
You have
someone
not
in society
validated their
know the
analogy.
geography of your ancestors by looking? I mean, like,
Yeah.
they wouldn't
Not to
know
mention,
that
women
you're
also have
23.
It's like you're comparing apples and oranges. That's what I'm saying. Gender, which is this is not, it's not comparable to the ancestors, your ancestry. These are two completely different things, like salt and a fucking a block of wood. They're not the same. You can't compare them.
It's both an argument of biological determinism or identity and how we're going to view it. So I'm asking, how can you say one should be identity and have nothing to do with biological determinism, but the other one has to be only biological determinism?
Because
that's the question.
I hope you guys know the next conversation is transspeciesism, but continue.
Yeah, no shit. That's
Let's
the whole thing. Is like we can just put trans in front of everything and I have to argue for it. Like, why do I have to argue for everything that has trans in front of it?
You can show exactly proof where somebody's ancestry comes from.
Okay.
And you can take your pants off, but that has nothing to do with it.
Ridiculous. What do you
Slipper
mean?
does have
You
a point.
can't.
Slipper has a point.
I can
Slipper.
show you. I'm from this place on the map, and that makes me gay.
Slipper. Yes, the thing about your ancestors, you're 100% right. We're saying though, if we're conflating transcultural and transrace, but when we say transcultural, if a white guy who grew up in a black neighborhood wants to now transition to be black,
how do you?
Right?
No one is going to do this.
He wants to transition. He wants to be trans African American.
Yo, I just proved that these things are not analogous. Am I wrong?
Yes, you're wrong.
So
you're totally wrong. No one can look at
because
your
you can actually
23andMe.
literally verify where somebody's ancestry comes from. You
no
cannot
one-
literally verify what somebody's gender is, right?
No
These
one
things
can.
are not the same.
No one can verify where your ancestry came from looking at you while you're walking down the street. No one can get a copy of your 23andMe, and no one can look at your genitalia while you're walking down the street.
I mean, I actually, like, you can kind of tell where some people might be coming.
No.
Like,
Well, right, but we're arguing about people who want to transition.
Please stop.
Oh, wait,
Listen, the historical baggage is very real.
Can't you literally define your
That didn't prove anything. What you just said doesn't matter if you look like when you walk in the street.
Your
No, it
mic's
doesn't.
really slow, really low.
Why does it matter what your ancestors
If somebody
were
got
when you get
surgery to look
surgery?
Asian, and they
When you
walked
get
down the street
surgery-
and I thought they were Asian, who gives a yeah, maybe I'll think they're Asian. Who gives a fuck? If I just see them walking down the block, who
Okay,
gives
if
a
they're
fuck?
black,
That
if
means
they're black,
nothing.
right. If they're black, right.
And and they got surgery to look black, and they're walking down the street, and I see them. Will I think they're black? Yeah, probably. Who fucking cares? What
Will
does that
you
prove?
allow them to say the N-word?
If I don't know,
why is it devolving to this? Why are we getting down to like? Can
I said from the beginning we shouldn't
It's
talk about this
Destiny's
at all.
Discord. It has to come to
Because
the
the whole point, of being allowed to say the N-word is because of the history of white people.
Make that language
allowed. White
I said
people
no,
aren't
they
allowed to say
can't.
the N-word. White people aren't allowed to say the N-word because they don't have the shared history of oppression that black people in America do. But if you're trans race, would you then be allowed to say it?
No,
is my question.
If you were a trans woman, could you?
I mean, I'm gonna
you
say
like claim that you were raped? What the hell?
No, if you're a trans woman, you could call people like bitch, and it's more okay than if you're a guy.
Right, but now we've accepted
They understand it's not the same. I know
transracial and transgender are the same.
So like the motivation.
She's the one that asks about trans women.
The problem, the problem becomes that you're asking this question based on like being able to say a word rather than like
which you can say.
Validating
Can say it.
rather than validating like the lived experience of people who are trying to change the way that we're looking at gender identity.
You have 200 years to say the N-word.
It's such an absurd question because if somebody made themselves look black and then said the N-word, nobody would know. Right?
No one would
We're
give
talking
a
about a
fuck.
fantasy. We're talking about a literal
You knew,
fantasy
but if you
thing.
knew they were
It's never
transracial,
gonna happen in a
if you
million
knew they were
years.
Once again, you're getting to like the point of having this conversation. It feels like solely to undermine any future conversation you're going to have about transgenderism.
Out of control, like fantastical.
Well, then just say that.
Let's pause. Then, first of all, I hate the phrase
say trans
lived
people
experience.
suck.
But Slipper, like the problem is that the same arguments you're making against transracialism, like
transracialism doesn't exist. I'm not making an argument.
Wait.
Entertain the hypothetical, you pussy. Entertain the hypothetical, you pussy.
You didn't even hear what
I'm
you
not
didn't even
making
hear
an
what I was saying.
argument against a thing that doesn't exist.
Slipper,
He's
bro,
trying
listen,
to point out
listen.
that Rat is making a
No,
bad.
great
Rat
point,
is
good
making a
point.
bad analogy, right? First of all, King. Secondly, like the analogy you would make right now to what Rat is doing would be like, well, would you expect accept somebody,
bro? I'm not talking
who
about. I'm not talking about Rat.
who stop. So you're talking to Slipper, who is trying to tell Rat that like the question being asked, the analogy being made is a disanalogous, and it's also just bad faith, right? Like
Okay,
if
that's
somebody
great. I don't
wanted
care.
to trade change their race so they could say the N-word is like
Yeah, no,
asking
you
if
keep repeating
it's
the
like
same
asking
thing,
Benny, I don't
man.
give a
it's
fuck.
like
I don't give a
it's like
fuck what Rat's
asking if
saying, bro.
transgender people just switch genders so that they can use the
Benny, I
opposite
don't
sex
care. I
bathroom.
don't care what Rat is saying, okay? I'm saying something different. I don't give a fuck what Rat's saying, okay? So you don't
You're
need to explain to me what
criticizing
Rat's saying.
Slipper's fucking
No.
argument,
Listen,
and Slipper is literally just
I
telling
didn't even
Rat.
get the sentence in, and you don't even know what I'm criticizing. So shut the fuck up first, and then you can criticize me for criticizing him, but you don't know what I'm criticizing. So relax, bro. Okay. So Slipper, the problem that I'm hearing is that, like, when you're talking about, like, oh, we can trace, like, the ancestry back, right? Like, somebody could use this exact same argument saying we can tell what chromosomes you have, we can tell what genitalia
No, that's
you
not a
have.
real thing. You're making that up.
What do you mean?
That's not a real scientific thing.
Of
What's
course
not
it
a real
is.
scientific thing?
What do you
No,
mean?
it's not. There's
not
no
real?
gay gene. There's no gay chromosome.
Wait. No, I'm talking about transgender people, not gay people.
Genitalia.
Whatever the fuck it is.
No,
Actually, I'm
wait.
pretty sure there
Do you
is.
think the XX and
First of
XY
all,
chromosomes are not associated with
I'm gonna
true
bow out
genitalia?
on this. I'm gonna bow out on this because
Yeah, you probably should.
I
You probably
don't
should.
want to debate a fake thing that only exists
Dude,
to
Okay, bro. That's
invalidate
great.
trans people.
baby,
So
That's
you don't
great.
goodbye.
Bow
like
out.
asking what ifs. If someone asks you, what if, would you rather have 100 knives in your eye or like take a 9-inch dildo up your ass? You're not gonna answer that question just
I'm
because
gonna go
it's
9-inch.
never gonna happen.
He got triggered.
Hello.
I gotta go to bed too, but I just want to say
He's
I appreciate.
I'm just
entertaining
not
the
gonna engage with
hypothetical.
dumb
He's
shit.
being a baby. He's just quitting because he's being a baby. Entertain the hypothetical. Just because it's not real doesn't matter. We're just having a conversation.
Your hypothetical is dog shit, man.
It only
Okay,
exists
first
to
of all,
invalidate
I didn't
trans
bring
people.
up
It only
Batman.
exists to
I didn't bring
demean
up
trans
Your
people.
transrace.
But the
existence is dog
question,
shit.
the
Let's
question that
go.
you're
The reason I
asking,
bring up the reason I bring up the N-word example is because you wouldn't think it's right for that trans black person to say the N-word because they don't have the
They're
shared
not
experience.
analogous things.
Dude, just
no,
bring
it's the
up
thing. The thing
Just
that
bring
bring
you're
up the
asking,
non-shared
Rat.
history rather than bringing. Why do
right,
you
so
have to
you
bring
wouldn't
up the
consider them
N-word
black.
thing?
You wouldn't consider them black in
No,
that sense.
no. Stop. So we all, so
Still an extreme anyway.
in like having the conversation about the comparison earlier, right? Like you would probably accept the lived experience portion, right? Like I once again, I think somebody
History.
would probably be like transcultural rather than like transracial. And if you're simply asking, if like you then pivot the question to, well, what if somebody who is white decided that they wanted to be black just to say the N-word? And this is like in comparison to how we deal with like the transgender experience. It would be like, well, what if a transgender person, or what if somebody decided to become transgender just to use the opposite sex
Which is
bathroom?
super
Right? It's like a
dumb.
bad
So
argument.
Benny, what does it mean to accept the lived
Super dumb.
experience of somebody? I don't know what this means.
In terms of like identity?
You keep talking about like accepting the lived experience of this person. What does that mean?
Yeah. So
You know what it means, dude.
when
What are
I
you
hear
talking about?
people who are transgender talk about their gender identity, to some extent, I have to accept that their lived experience is completely different from mine. Right.
Are you
So
saying that they
in
believe
like
that they're
in good
experiencing these
faith,
things? Is that what you're saying?
Don't.
I mean, they are experiencing something, right? Like
So,
that's the whole
Yeah,
point of
obviously.
like
so
categorizing
essentially,
their gender.
so
How is that
How do you
not
like
true for someone if they claim to be
like this
transracial?
is a weird basis. So if you're saying that I should accept that this person believes they are experiencing something, whether it's correct or not, I don't give a fuck.
What do you mean?
They believe that they're experiencing something. Of
no,
course,
no. The reason why you do that is because you can't tell what other people are experiencing.
Right.
You have to go based off.
What am I supposed to like? So there are plenty of good faith arguments, right? None that I'm gonna like dive into deeply because
Why not?
Because I'm not super well read on like the gender identity and how that plays out, right? Like I just accept.
What if it was just like it's in the purview of the spectrum of people in general, and we identify more closer to that range of it.
That's kind of how I've understood it, right? Like if there's a lived experience for like the spectrum of man versus woman, depending on where somebody falls on that, like they may decide to categorize.
I mean, there's no reason to change if you like redheads, right?
This
I don't
doesn't
believe so.
Like this doesn't make any sense to me in the context of like transracialism. Like this lived experience thing doesn't make any sense
defend
to me whatsoever.
transracialism because I don't want to defend anything that has trans in front of it. That's my opinion.
But like what my defense of transgenderism has nothing to do. My defense of being gay or whatever, this has nothing to do with the lived experience of the person. Of course, these people experiencing things differently than I am, right? If I'm not gay, then, or if I'm not female or whatever, right? They're experiencing things differently than me. Yes,
but
that doesn't matter.
Valid, right? Which is the only point that
valid in what sense?
It doesn't matter if it's valid. It's just basically like some agency for me.
No, but wait. So this is important. So I'm going to say something that's going to trigger a lot of people. Realize the comparison is not. Oh, sorry. I'm about to say something that might be a little triggering. Okay, I want everybody to relax when I say it, though. Okay.
Whoa, dude.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, I got a Glock. I don't know what else could trigger.
When you're talking about like the lived experience of like a schizophrenic, right? Just they have a very different lived experience, but this doesn't make anything particularly real or unreal, right?
Yeah, but you would define that mental disorder as something that's like encroaching on them, like in a way that fucks them up, right?
Yes.
Whereas, like, if you had affinity to redheads, it wouldn't be, right?
Well, obviously, they experiencing things differently, right? But me saying that we shouldn't discriminate against them has nothing to do with whether they experience things differently, right? It's just it's a coincidence they experience things differently, right? That's it. I don't give a fuck if they do or don't.
Yeah, I'm not making a stance on people that experience something differently.
I really appreciate this conversation. I have to go to bed, but I really appreciate the oracles of the internet. And I'm pretty black-pilled. I think we should, if someone in good faith wants to identify as whatever they want, we should say okay. That's my position.
You know
that was my
Wait a minute.
If this is a real movement and they give me a real argument, I'll consider it. But it's not happening.
Right. Okay, can I argue?
They give you all the same arguments as transgenderism.
Wait, I got a real one.
So you never disproved that, like that the geography of your ancestors is the same thing. You said